Social media is where it's at for so much of politics today, but are the candidates actually figuring out how to speak directly to their audiences and go around people like me? Hi, I'm Brian Lilly, political columnist for the Toronto Sun, and well, pretty active on social media, so that matters. But what about the candidates in the Liberal leadership race? Are they doing a good job or a bad job? Jeff Ballingall is the CEO of Mobilize Media, is a guy I've worked with on and off for years in various capacities, and someone who actually knows what he's talking about. Wrote a recent column for us on this very issue and wanted to check in with him today. Uh, Jeff, now that both candidates, the two big ones, have officially launched in the Liberal leadership race, wanted to get your quick take on Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland. Are they using the platforms available to them adequately? I mean, I was watching Freeland on YouTube on the weekend, um, and her audio was all off, and she didn't even broadcast her launch speech to X. It was just on YouTube with audio that seemed like the mic was shoved down a toilet somewhere.
Well, not to mention the all the disruptors and protests. But
I
beyond,
mean, that's not on her.
yeah, that's not on
Um,
her. That's not on her. But it's certainly not great.
yeah, it's bad. That's not on her. I mean, maybe the policies of the Liberal government of appeasing people like this for, I don't know, 15 months, maybe that didn't help. But
Well, campaigns should probably
but
have
in
had.
terms of how they're using various social media platforms, how they're using the ability to go directly to the public.
So it's interesting for Carney and Freeland. They are not starting as equals with Justin Trudeau. So Justin Trudeau was able to build a brand as a celebrity and as a social media star. And so,
And as a prime minister, of course, you just automatically attract a lot of people.
right, of course. And so for Carney and Freeland to start, they don't have the audiences, they don't have the subscribers, they don't have the followers, and so when they put out a launch video, it's not going to get the eyeballs that a regular video from Justin Trudeau would get. Further to Trudeau's advantages too is that he had I mean, it doesn't matter for electoral politics, but he'd had a mass audience across the world, whether it's in India or Pakistan or Africa. Millions of people would tune in from all over the world because Justin Trudeau was this big celebrity. And so that might not, as I said, it might not matter for votes, but what it does is it juices social media algorithms. So if a lot of people are watching in Pakistan or India or China, there's a lot more people who are now going to be watching in Canada because of how that content's getting engaged, and then social media algorithms like X or Meta would then display that to more people here in Canada. So it all helps, but when you're starting from scratch, which is basically what Freeland and Carney are doing, it's really hard to get organic eyeballs with a big media push, big paid media push, and a traditional media push, and they're just frankly not doing it.
You look at someone like Pierre Poilievre, he has figured this out, even though he's on the opposition benches, doesn't get the benefit of the doubt from the mainstream media. Look at his recent interview with Jordan Peterson. Last I looked, and I'm sure it's much higher now, it was 41 million views for his interview. And people will say, well, that's just, a 3-second scroll past. Okay, I can grant you that. That sometimes happens. But as someone who's involved in social media, who knows the game, if you're getting 41 million views, even half of that watching half the video, or 40% watching the full video, uh, maybe I'm giving away my numbers here. That's impressive. You're still hitting millions and millions of people. And Poilievre's launch video to announce that he wanted to run to be leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, that itself got millions of views. I've gotten millions of views by posting clips of my interviews with Pierre. He's figured out in a way that I'm not sure that Freeland and Carney have yet.
No, they haven't at all. I mean, I don't even think Carney understands he's been done no social media. There's so many ideas I would have if I was working with him just to do, a post-launch speech video where you're like, hi, I'm Mark Carney. Here's why I'm running. None of that.
And we should point out to people, like, you've worked on successful campaigns in the past.
Yeah,
You've helped
many
people get
non-successful
into these
and
positions.
many non-successfve as well. But
Yeah, that's the nature of the beast.
yeah, that is the case. In conservative politics, you tend to lose more than you win. But yeah, I've done work with leading conservative politicians. I ran the digital for.
But but not currently running Pierre Poilievre's campaign.
No, I'm not. No,
Just so people know that.
no, I'm not. And I also founded Canada Proud too, so we're quite active on that space. Um, so Freeland, she's been active, but she's very in the Kamala Harris vein of social media, where it's kind of nonsensical. It's weird branding. It's trying to be artsy, and not impactful. So if you notice what works for Pierre and what has worked, in the States too, is you need that authenticity. You don't need to be flashy or artsy. It doesn't need to win a Vogue competition, but it needs to be engaging and colorful and bright and bring people in with vibrant colors, and emotion and reason and all those things to get people fired up and motivated. Pierre does it really well, whether it's a long form interview with Jordan Peterson, which is incredible, or his videos from his leadership days, or even as a member of parliament. He always understood how to tell a good story, how to respect the audience. Very informative, but also very entertaining. And I think successful politicians know how to do that, and we're not seeing that from Carney and Freeland yet.
You mentioned that you don't need to be flashy, you don't need to be artsy. Just my experience over the last while, sometimes the most impactful things I've done, I've just picked up my phone, I've talked into it, I've posted the video, and a day later, 250,000 people have watched me explain what I think is happening in A, B, or C. That's far more viewers than they're getting on CBC Power and Politics or CTV's Power Play. I mean, those are massive numbers for Canada. Are there videos getting well over 1 million? It is that authenticity. It is just being able to speak honestly that breaks through.
Yeah, and I think, and that's what people, all these podcast strategies are so important, and that's what I advise my political clients, my corporate clients, figuring out ways to reach people where they live, and they're not consuming media in the way they once did. They're on YouTube. Brian, I'm not just a guest. I do watch your content all the time. I was actually watching you this morning. But yeah, like that's where people do it. And I know my dad watches you on his smart TV or on his phone, and that's where people are doing it. So that's why it was so critical what Trump was doing, whether he was going on a golf podcast, a golf YouTube show, or Theo Vaughn or Joe Rogan. Those are great examples. And the conversations that we're delving into were nothing I've heard a politician ever speak about before. And there's so much appeal hearing Donald Trump, go off about golfing or partying or dating or anything like that. It's so novel, and I think that's what I really appreciated about what Pierre was doing with Jordan Peterson. It's because it was just so detailed and timely, and I'm excited to hear more from Pierre and Premier Ford and others.
So look, I go back to people that have mocked uh, Pierre going on with Jordan Peterson. I pointed out that if you go back to 2012 and the U.S. presidential election, Barack Obama was avoiding political interviews. He's up for his second term. Any politician up for their second term has baggage. What did he do? He went on the most popular morning shows for radio. So he'd call into shows like, DJ Pimp with the Limp, and people mocked him for it and said, oh, he's avoiding serious interviews. Guess what? He's talking to suburban moms where they live. Now, that was 2012. That's more than a dozen years ago. COVID changed commuting patterns, therefore changed listening patterns, all of that. But when you talk about, Trump going on these podcasts that are about golf or with Theo Vaughn, it's the same sort of thing. You're talking to people where they are. I'm sure you don't want to be advising liberal leadership candidates, and I'm sure you don't want to be advising them for free. But like, what would you be telling them to do if you were working with them? I mean, where do they find the audience? I thought Freeland's parts of Freeland's rollout were good. They were better than Carney's. She had an op-ed on a Friday. in the Toronto Star. All right. So that's the liberal Bible for Canada. She released a video on social media that doesn't speak to me, but it would speak to the liberal base. Donald
I
Trump
think
doesn't like it.
yeah, to be fair to Freeland, I think her launch video was pretty strong. It wasn't bad. The rest of everything else has been horrible. But uh, I don't want to get too much into advice. Like, there's devious things I would love them. Sorry, I wouldn't love them to do. I would love them to not do. But if I were advising them, I would advise them to do. But I guess more or less, it's they need to understand that demographically and with technology, the country is very, very, very different than it was 10 years ago when Trudeau was first elected, and it's certainly very different than it was than the early 2000s. Freeland seems to be running a campaign from 2015. Mark Carney seems to be running a campaign from 2004. So that's what I
Well,
would.
when you look at some of the people that are around him and the 5 different campaign managers that are running his show, that might explain part of it.
I mean, if you think that Andrew Coyne is relevant to the average potential liberal voter in Mississauga or Brampton in in 2025, you're dreaming. Like, they don't he's people do not know who Rosie Barton is. They don't know who Andrew Coyne are. Like, they don't know who these people are. And it's really important that you figure out ways to reach people that goes beyond, the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, which is, we could discuss that, but like, it's a small audience, it's an older audience, it's a very liberal audience. So if you're looking, Carney or Freeland, they need to understand that they need to be building a parade into the general, and we're not seeing that. This isn't a two-part campaign. It needs to be one campaign because they're
Yeah,
going to have no
because it
time
could be coming so quickly.
because it's going to be coming so quickly. So that's what Pierre understood. He built a parade from the start. It kept on going after the leadership, right? Pierre understood this, and that was with many years to build. Freeland and Carney need to understand this is it's the starting line was last weekend. The finish line is the general election. It's not the leadership. So everything they should be doing should be in advance of the
Yeah,
general.
I mean, there is a world where we may not see a general election until October. They
But even
give,
October, right? It's not very.
but October's not that far away. But there is a world where they signed a deal with Jagmeet Singh, who, is a man of his word. We know, and he's told us he's going to vote down the government until they give him something good. So, I mean, there's a world where that could happen, but there's also a world where we're headed into a general election at the end of March, 3 weeks, 4 weeks after the Liberal leadership ends. So you got to do that. Talk to me about the Jon Stewart thing. My knock against Mark Carney has always been he's a smart guy, he's an accomplished guy, obviously telegenic, looks good on TV, can't speak like a normal person to save his life. He showed that he could there. And look, my assessment of him was from someone who covered him more than a decade ago when he was bank governor. It was always difficult to get him to speak in a soundbite that anyone who wasn't a bank economist could understand. He showed that he could do that, however awkwardly, on The Daily Show. What do you make of the overall appearance, though? Got Canadian media talking,
Got
got a
Canadian,
lot of clips.
got a lot of clips, got a lot of clicks. Jon Stewart is not the cultural force he was 10 years ago. Uh,
No,
his ratings speak to that. His demographics would speak to that. So,
but he couldn't go on Gutfeld on Fox. So,
well, I think it's weird that he didn't do it in Canada. I think it's strange. I don't know. If he was going to do that, that's fine. I wouldn't have done my launch there as a campaigner, but his actual launch was it was just such a disaster that, no wonder he had to do Jon Stewart. He needed Jon Stewart. He needed to do a foreign interview from a liberal voice, and he got it because the guy didn't ask any tough questions. So he may as well do Mark Critch next here in Canada if he wants that sort of softball interview. Although no one watches Mark Critch. At least some people watch Jon Stewart.
yeah, I'm pretty sure my audience is bigger than Mark Critch at this point. I'll
I think
guarantee you.
my living room holds more people than Mark Critch's audience.
Yeah. So, what is the role of social media going into the next general election campaign? I remember reading pieces back as far as, well, probably started to hear about social media, being an impact in 2006 election. By the 2008, 2008 election with Stephen Harper, it was like, oh, these guys are going to be able to bypass the gallery and speak directly to their audiences. Now they actually can.
Now they can, but it's also important to understand that you can't just do it from official voices. It's one of the reasons I started Ontario Proud and then later Canada Proud. Is as a small C conservative, I always felt there's a lot of people who identify with being conservative, but they would never put a blue lawn sign on their lawn. They're never going to share something from Pierre Poilievre or Stephen Harper or Doug Ford or whatever, just because there's stigma attached to being partisan. There's stigma attached to being like, hey, I'm a conservative. But if you find ways to speak to conservative issues, there's a lot of people who are conservative if they're on right issues. So whether it's crime, whether that's like a patriotism angle like Canada Proud or Ontario Proud, finding these different ways to speak to people's latent conservative political leanings and activate them and get them to talk about these issues and get these issues that matter to conservatives. If we can get people talking about those issues as opposed to ones that are unhelpful to conservatives, I think it's really important. So I think that's what we're going to see. And that's what we saw in the last US election, is figuring out not only, Trump had his social media, his official channels, he had his third party groups that supported him. And that's a huge industry in the States. And then, but he also had the cultural voices. He had people that were friendly to him in a way that didn't exist, 10 years ago. There were no Theo Vaughns, there were no Joe Rogans, there weren't these friendly platforms where, Trump could go on for an hour and speak in detail with a comedian or, a golf instructor or whatever. And so it's so much easier to reach people and find different audiences, be them golf fans or be them, stand-up comedy fans.
All right. Give me a quick breakdown. We'll end on this. Give me a quick breakdown of the platforms that matter for politicians, regardless of stripe. 10 years ago, Facebook, Obama used Facebook incredibly well and people applauded that. Trump used Facebook incredibly well. There was the Cambridge Analytica scandal and Facebook downgraded politics. My audience on Facebook has shrunk. Instagram is huge with a certain set. TikTok, huge with a certain set. X is obviously news junkies. Which platforms do people got to go to? All of them? Or do you just go on LinkedIn and as somebody described it to me, LinkedIn is OnlyFans for the mid-manager set?
Yeah, you see those people that post weird personal stuff on LinkedIn. I don't get it, but no, I think they're all important for different reasons. I think X is increasingly more important. I think we're going to see big changes from that platform as Elon Musk expands video and payment options on there. I think people have gravitated. I think it is the leading one for cultural relevance. I think it's where everything else peters from. I think Meta just changed their algorithm here in North America. It definitely affected us here in Canada. So political content is being seen again. Working
I was down to like 5% of my previous volume.
yeah,
It's insane.
our numbers have skyrocketed on Meta in the last little bit. Our one page has grown 20% alone in the last a week after being stagnant forever. So that shows me that we're getting, reaching a lot more people. So Meta matters. I mean, we'll see what happens with TikTok. TikTok still matters. They all matter. YouTube Shorts, you got to be everywhere. And a lot of people aren't anywhere. AKA Mark Carney.
All right. Jeff Bollingal, CEO of Mobilize Media. Thanks so much. Drop a comment down below. Let us know what you think. Who's doing well? Who's doing poorly? Where are you actually tell me that. Where are you getting your news in online social media? And don't forget, subscribe to our channel.